Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Friday, March 11th. Congratulations on making it through another volatile week in both the crypto and equity markets. Things seem to be calming down a bit here today, but that can always change in an instant. So we'll take a look at some charts, some things we think are important as we head into the weekend. But before we get started, CJ, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing well, Monty. Thanks. A lot of interesting data I'm looking forward to check out today. So I'm looking forward to jumping in to things with you here. But how you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Felt like a pretty long week. I think because of the price action, we had some swings up. It's like the 45K level, back down below the 40K level, some scares, some big fundamental news related events with the executive order. So a lot happened this week. A lot could happen this weekend as well. So I'm excited to dive into the charts, take a look at what the technicals are telling us, because it is looking pretty interesting here as we wrap up the week.
Yeah, I want to start with an interesting piece of data today. A lot of folks, especially on Twitter, have been talking about this. Just looking at Bitfinex short positions and the rate in which individuals are opening up short positions. So for the most part, as you can see, judging by this blue line and the amount of Bitcoin shorts on Bitfinex that we've seen across the last few months, there hasn't been a whole lot. But when we've had like spikes, just being in the nature of a downtrend, like typically they've been pretty accurate. Of course, we can also see the example of last summer when the shorts on Bitfinex were very bearish, really shorting into that 45 level or 42 level. And, it's interesting to see how this spike will play out. I don't think there's a whole lot you can draw from it yet, aside from just going to, say, the 15-minute charts. I think that traders saw the lower high that was put in on, Bitcoin yesterday. And, that leads some of them, especially on Bitfinex here, to open up short positions. So just an interesting increase in the amount of shorts that we've seen this morning. But I do want to move to the technicals because Bitcoin, while it had made a lower high, we're still holding the ascending level. Wow, I don't know if I've ever done this before. All right, here we go. Apologies for that, folks. All right, so as I had mentioned, we had created that lower high, and I think that led a lot of individuals to short, especially when last night it looked like we were going to break down from this level and put in potentially a lower low around, back into the lower, say 36 to 37K region. Barely holding that by a thread as of now, but still quite notable. I think if there's really anything that we can take from this and Bitcoin at its current price level is that it is in one of the most neutral postures that we've seen it in quite a long time. And you'll see what I mean when I add some of these indicators as well. Like for instance, just the macro trend scanner, the EMA crossovers. We're having consistent crossovers and we're very close to creating many false signals here in which it's a choppy environment. So it's difficult. It's probably not going to give you one clear signal right off the bat. Also, you look at Keltner channels, we are rejected by that 20 simple moving average, but we are right in the middle of the range. Same with, say, Bollinger Bands running right into the range, as well as the Williams Alligator moving averages, really facing some resistance now. So we'll see, but definitely not the greatest thing to see putting in the lower high last night as the daily candle closed there. So with that being said, I'm not going to give up on this bullish trend until we start closing below these levels, say below 38K. 38K to 38K5 is pretty much my line in the sand to maintain the bullish bias. Also, I do want to touch on the weekly chart and some longer term timeframes, but Monty, would you like to share anything first?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly tie in what you're talking about with what we're seeing in the equity markets as well, because like you said, Bitcoin is in a relatively neutral state. And one thing that we've seen for sure is kind of the relationship that Bitcoin has showed with the Qs. And a lot of people have tried to, make it a correlation, say that one affects the other. But I definitely just think there is a relationship. They have independent catalysts for price action, but when one of them starts to move, it can certainly bring the other one with it. So, I wanted to look at the Qs first because we have been in this prevailing downtrend. And, unlike Bitcoin, we did kind of make a slight lower high here, but still, this is the 1 hour chart for the Qs continuing to trend down here. And I think that, until we are able to break this trend, until we're able to show signs of strength, we may be in for just a general lack of speculation into, emerging more volatile assets like Bitcoin. One thing we always talk about is how the Qs kind of act as sort of a gauge for risk tolerance for speculative investors. There is a lot of overlap in terms of who's participating in the Qs and who's participating in Bitcoin, especially from a more like institutional hedge fund perspective. So, one thing I think that we definitely need to happen for the Qs and could potentially be a catalyst for Bitcoin to break out of this critical 45K level that we've been, consecutively sold into, is for the Qs to break out of this downward sloping trend line. And what that would look like would essentially just be that kind of formation that CJ always talks about, where we finally come up to retest this level, we break above it, then come back down, retest it as support, and confirm it as support before going higher. So, that's what I would want to see from the Qs. I think if we do get this break, out of this downward sloping trend line, following this kind of lower high we were able to put in, or higher low we were able to put in here, excuse me, and, just kind of round out this bottom, start to climb higher, that would come on the back of, perhaps some positive fundamental news, and some developments between Russia and Ukraine. Who knows what the catalyst could be? But I think this is something that we need to see in order for Bitcoin to, really gain some, more speculative investors coming in and climb us back above that 45K level. So I don't necessarily think that, Bitcoin leads to positive price action in the Qs, or the Qs lead to positive price action in Bitcoin. But, whenever we see that increase in speculation, it often coincides with an increase in risk tolerance as well. So I think right now that kind of weak performance in the Qs is holding Bitcoin back a little bit, and that could also offer an explanation why we're seeing some short stacking up here. CJ, it's just general weakness in the traditional equity markets. So, but I'll pass back to you.
Yeah, it's an interesting relationship, right? We actually have some of the equity traders at Market Rebellion who will look at Bitcoin, before the S&P 500 or before the equity market opens to try to get kind of like the tone of the market, which I find is quite common as well. Like many times you'll see, during like the late evening sessions or, morning for Asia. And then, when the United States wakes up, that price action that occurred the previous night kind of doesn't change a whole lot. It's typically very similar to when the U.S. markets open, but it's just been a common theme of like the last month or two. That could definitely change over time. Nothing set in stone. But with that being said, I do want to look at some longer term time frames. So, with this weakness, I think it is just important to bear in mind and have some downside targets to mitigate risk. If we are to lose this critical 37 level, we got the long-term regression, which is slightly different than log, but it's still been incredibly accurate, as you can see it calling these macro bottoms roughly at 20K. But this will come up just like the 200 moving average, 200 week moving average, which I'm going to show in just a minute. This will come up to roughly 25K as we consolidate here, and we'll see where that ultimately ends up. But I think this is a decent bottom target, if big point there, if we are to drop and lose that level. Also, if we look at, I do want to show the daily chart with the log growth curves. We are barely still holding this level. So very important to hold this upward like 38 to 38.2 level. Otherwise, we could see a drop down right to 34. And, then we could talk about the interesting possibility of a 30K or a test of the bottom of the range. That would be quite interesting. But overall, you see where you see some of this macro confluence, lining up roughly 29K. We've seen us break below this level a few times throughout Bitcoin's history. And also, if you take a look at the 200 week moving average, if this is a bear market, or I mean, I guess the definition is kind of arbitrary. I'm going to say if the Qs enter a prolonged bear market, Bitcoin will likely go and follow and will eventually touch this 200 moving average. I think that's a good general floor price for Bitcoin, or at least it has been throughout the past, 10 years of Bitcoin's existence. And right now, it may seem that that level is very low at 20K, but it's going to come up. It's been ascending this entire time. If we consolidate here for another month or just kind of maintain current price levels, we will see this come up to 25K, and we'll probably line up in confluence, with the linear regression bottom here. So I think that seems like a really good target to, consider accumulating quite a bit if we hit those levels. Not saying we have to, just trying to understand how Bitcoin has performed historically during very bearish conditions, and what some potential price targets could be if we actually get there. Like I said earlier, I'm still maintaining the bullish bias so long as we maintain support above this band and maintain the ascending level. But if we can't, then of course we have to reassess and reevaluate the situation. So just my thoughts. Monty, I'll pass it back to you, sir.
Thank you, CJ. Yeah, always important to have that context. And, just to tie in your points with Bitcoin there quickly with Ethereum as well, because I do see some comments from John and Mark in the chat here. Like you said, CJ, and like John points out in the chat, we still have this upward sloping trend line here holding up for ETH. We put in this low here, a higher low here, and kind of maintain that higher low overnight. So that is encouraging. And also it does provide some immediate levels for us to retest here in the near future. 2,500 has historically been a very critical level for ETH. And, this does mark a breakout level for the trend. If we can't maintain this level here on the uptrend, then, that formation that I talked about for Bitcoin, we could potentially see the exact opposite where, we break down below, come down to retest it as resistance, and then continue to climb lower. But, as long as we kind of maintain this level for the time being, it is encouraging that we're continually putting in higher lows, climbing higher for the time being. And, ETH kind of has this downward sloping trend line as well, that's been emerging basically since our market top. And, getting above that would be very critical. So getting above that $2,800 level, seeing some consolidation above that range, putting in continued higher lows, I think would bode very well for ETH. And from a fundamental perspective as well, ETH just locked away its 10 millionth token that's now staked. So that is some massive value locked away in preparation for their shift to proof of stake. So that also sets up some favorable, supply and demand dynamics as well. So ETH is in an interesting spot here, but from a technical perspective, I still do like what I'm seeing. So yeah, that's all I got though, CJ. I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, I'll just bring it back to the beginning of the show when we saw a large amount of those shorts being opened. It seems like we're just seeing a lot of traders, specifically Bitfinex, but many instances we've seen that like arise as smart money, so to speak. So we'll see, but a lot of them are betting on bearish sell-off this weekend. So we'll see if that occurs on some low volume, but doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. Either way, appreciate everybody watching today. If you enjoyed this content here, please consider liking and subscribing. Helps us quite a bit. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our trade insights and the trades we take, on a weekly basis, feel free to check out the link in the description below at markrebellion.com/trycrypto. But overall, we appreciate it, guys, and hope you have a wonderful day in the world wherever you are.